Hey, and thank you for tuning in to the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. We are finishing the book of Luke today. We have made it to chapter 24, and this is coming now after Jesus has died. Obviously, in the last chapter, we ended with his death and his burial, and now in this chapter, we are finishing out the book talking about his resurrection. Now, it's crazy when you read the Bible and you see people's doubt. We're like, you have seen firsthand the miracles of Jesus. You have heard him prophesy over what will come, and yet when it happens, we're like, huh? And yet, let's not fool ourselves. We can be just as foolish. God has proven in his word, he has declared in his word truth and what will happen, yet we still question it all the time. So for one example, let's just see how we can relate to a group of people that first heard of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm going to be reading the first 12 verses of chapter 24. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb where Jesus was laid. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" I love that. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? And here in my Bible, this is read. This is them quoting actual words of Jesus. This is what Jesus said. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day, he even gave them a timetable, on the third day be raised again. And then it says in verse 8, then they remembered his words. I'm like, what? If God literally said those specific words to me, don't you think you'd tuck that away like at the forefront of your mind? But they had forgotten. Sounds a little bit like us. We forget the promises of God. We forget the truth of God because of life. It goes on. When they came, verse 9, back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11. Who's the 11? Well, this would be the 12 minus 1, right? The 12 disciples minus Judas, who had betrayed Jesus. We talked about that a few days ago. And so they went back to the 11, the disciples, and to the others. Here's who there was. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. Told them, hey, guess what we just saw? We went to the tomb. It was empty. Angels were there, and they reminded us of what Jesus himself said. How do these faithful men of God, these 11, how do they respond? Verse 11, but they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. What? This is crazy to me. What do you mean nonsense? Peter, however, right? Gala Peter, brash Peter. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Okay, he's showing some faith here. He wants to see it for himself. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering to himself, what has happened? Isn't this crazy? I'm just like, okay, I don't want to act like these people weren't the brightest, lights in the barrel, but the sharpest knives in the drawer, however you want to say that. But they weren't, okay? They clearly heard Jesus' teaching. They clearly heard the truth. And yet they still had their humanity that they had to be at war with, just like you and me. It gives me hope, though. I'm not making fun of them. I'm relating. I have read this book cover to cover. I have dedicated my life to being a follower of Christ. And yet when new things come up, when unexpected things come up, when even expected things happen, I question. I'm like, is this God? Is it not God? Like, isn't it crazy the frailty of our human understanding? And yet how much weight do we put on our understanding? You see, oftentimes we don't want to obey God until we understand God. Oftentimes we don't want to follow God until we see the whole path. And that's not how God works. Even in this, we see that God did show them. He did tell them what would happen. And yet in their own human frailty, they still questioned. So let's be encouraged by this, that God understands. These were literally his chosen guys, his chosen group, his closest followers, and yet they struggled with this. So let's be feeling a little encouraged. That's not just you and I, but let's also be challenged, because sitting on the other side of the table reading this, we see how foolish it sounds and how foolish we must look as believers today when we doubt, when we question, when we think we need to understand before we trust. What are you questioning today? What are you doubting today? What are you sitting back and waiting until you understand today, when you could lean in and trust and obey? Let's be quick to trust and understand later. Let's be quick to obey and see what God does through our obedience, rather than thinking that we have to fully understand. God fully understands. We can just trust him. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in today. I do want to invite you to Shrewsbury Assembly tomorrow. We're having a huge service. It's our celebration Sunday, ending out our fast. Also, we're going to have some live water baptisms, which is always an awesome celebration to see what God is doing in people's lives. And after church, a little plug, the student ministry Ignite is going to be having a fundraiser. So bring a couple bucks with and join us for lunch. We'd love to see you there and supporting our teens. But we hope to see you at church tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll see you on Monday for another Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth.